I want you to take a look at where I colored it black. So this black from here to here is called our terminal shank. Now you see where it's not colored black. So from here to the tip, from the end of the black to the tip is a working end. Now our terminal shank is extremely important because a lot of what we do we can't see. We're working underneath the gums. So you have to know the anatomy of the teeth that you're working on, and you have to do a lot of things by feel. And you look at your terminal shank to determine where your instrument is at. That's what our terminal shank is for. So typically to determine the right end of our instrument, we adapt the instrument. We adapt the working end and look at how the working end is. A quick little cheat reference is to look at where the shank meets the terminal shank, where the last bend of the shank right here. So the start of our terminal shank, that bend there makes a little V, what we're looking at. So a lot of the times if we say bend to the back or V to the back, that is a quick reference for us to know that we're using the right end of the instrument. So I'll show you in the mouth here. I'm doing the distal of tooth number 3. You can see the little bend onto my terminal shank. See, it's colored black right there. That little bend is towards the back of the patient's throat or the back of the patient's mouth. That shows that I'm using the correct end of the instrument. If I were to turn it this way, now that little bend is going towards the front of the patient's mouth. That is the incorrect end. Another way you can tell is if you look at that terminal shank, you see the terminal shank is crossing the tooth. We don't want that. The terminal shank should be going up and over. Explorer, we typically adapt to the mesial. So we adapt to the mesial surface. So if you look at the working end of the Explorer, the working end is adapted really nicely to the tooth right here. If I use the wrong end of the Explorer, you can see that the tip is poking out into the gums. That's what we don't want. It's not adapted. So we adapt to the mesial surface with the Explorer. However, we start at the distal. And now you can see though that we are using the right end. So there's a few ways to determine that you're using the right end. The quickest, easiest reference is just to look at that bend, but you can also determine the working end that you're using as well too. So with the Explorer, you want to also make sure that when you are exploring, you are not, the handle of course still coming out of the patient's mouth. Just like always, the handle's not coming out to the side. You also don't want your shank to be towards the buccal mucosa too much. You don't want your shank tipped in towards the occlusal plane too much either. You still want your instrument as parallel as possible to the long axis of the tooth, okay? So when you're using an Explorer, you start at the distal buccal line angle. Another thing we're looking at too is the tip of the instrument. The tip of the instrument, remember Explorer is very, very sharp. So you have to roll the instrument and you have to anticipate your movements and know the tooth anatomy. That way you're not traumatizing your patient's tissues. But the tip of the instrument, think of it like a car. The tip of the instrument is the headlights. So the headlights have to go where you're going. They have to be shining on the direction that you're going. So the tip of the instrument should be facing the direction that you're going. So since I'm starting on the distal buccal line angle and I'm going to go into the distal, the tip of my instrument is facing the distal. Start at that distal buccal line angle. Drop into the gums, the distal buccal line angle, go into the distal. Once you get to the 51% of the distal, you come up until you hit the contact and come out. You come out, you roll the instrument. So now that the tip is facing the mesial, go back to the distal buccal line angle, just a little further back from where you started, and go back underneath the gums, oblique strokes, oblique, oblique, oblique across the buccal surface. Rotate that instrument into the mesial and go into the mesial 51%, and then come up, exploring to the contact, come to the contact, come out.